I wanted to go back and reinforce the skills we were talking about at each step, because I said I wanted to kind of translate the writings into reality in some way. Now, again, absolutely keep in mind, there are many ways to use consultation, and I don't want to suggest that what I have here is somehow the golden way, or there's anything special about it, other than these are my thoughts around how I would model a Baha'i consultative process based on my experience in mediation and facilitation. Okay, so that's all we're looking at. But it gives you a context for looking at the writings. And I'm going to ask you to talk about it in groups for a little bit and see where the questions are. So we talked about engage. The skill there is creating guidelines. Now, in the book, you'll see a dozen different, maybe not a dozen, maybe half a dozen different models of group decision making, with probably in the book maybe there's 30 or 40 different guidelines. There are many guidelines to consider. Play around with them and see what works. The important thing is to at least have that discussion around what guidelines can we adopt. And in all of this, people will, God love us, but change is difficult. And if you go into a meeting of some sort and say, well, Abdu'l-Baha says we should create guidelines for our discussions, inevitably some people will say, yeah, that's a great idea, and others will say, oh no, we don't need to do that, we're fine. Okay? All I'm saying is don't take your first Mayo. That stay with it, and if it's something you believe that could help, the whole point of guidelines is to promote more vibrant, healthier consultation. That's all it should do. Okay? Empathize is just caring. Caring responses, listening to what people say. Model what you would like to see. If someone says something that's meaningful for them, at least thank them for sharing, being willing to share. But boy, that must be difficult. Thanks so much. Just like in the video, where she said, wow, thank you for sharing. You know, she says in there, it's not the solution, it's the response. Just acknowledge it just through your body language. Explore, again, asking better questions, open, neutral questions. Envision, where we kind of define what it is we're talking about. Frame it in an appropriate way. Okay, don't frame it too narrowly, don't frame it too broadly. But just framing is just stating the problem. What are we all working together on? How can we work together to do what? How can we work together to create a vibrant devotional community? How can we, you know, it gives you a starting point for ideas, essentially. If it's too big, you'll get lost. If it's too small, you just won't have enough variation. Expand, we did two things there, and I included the pass around in there. Meditation, and when we sat and in silence, just did the cards. If nothing else, just say, hey, we need some ideas here. Let's just take out some cards, write them down, pass them around. A lot of LSAs told me they started doing that. Just to encourage that full participation, getting ideas out there, allowing people to express themselves. Elucidate is what I call a value scan, and that's when we kind of went through and identified the values we felt were part of this. At least acknowledging the value component of the decision you're making. Evaluate. Now, we're going to take a look at a couple other things this morning on that. The two things I just want to reinforce: offer choice, if nothing else. Okay, yes or no. Last night we saw an example of a yes or no recommendation at Feast. Okay, but think about what were the choices that might have been available, and the spectrum. Now, how much are we buying into this idea? Okay, we all love to agree in unity, but without that clash, we don't always come up with the best decision. You know, Lee and I were just talking. Lee mentioned that in physics and in science, quite often it's the clash that really brings things to light. You know, like in particle physics, you put two particles together and you create new particles, and you come to new understandings. It's almost like you have to expend great energy to discover the secrets of the universe. Spectrums, will work, won't work, new ideas. Those are just three different ways. We're going to do another way of coming up with better solutions that I call reciprocal negotiation, and we'll practice that once this morning. On execute, what I say is, and actually you don't exactly have all of this, I just realized you don't have all of this, and I'll share one slide with you. Just have clarity in your agreement. Who is going to do it? When are they going to do it? How much is it going to cost? And what do we hope to accomplish? Just be clear on what it is we're all agreeing to. I actually had several classes. I ran a mediation program for 10 years, and we'd have mediators, volunteer mediators, that would come back with agreements that were so contingent they were meaningless. Meaning that, well, if this party does this, this party will do this, and then they will do this, but they might do this, and you can't do it. You don't want contingencies. And we'll talk about that a little bit more this morning. And then examine, which we haven't done yet, but those of you that have been around have seen it, is looking at our consultation itself and looking at what worked, the deltas, and what would we like to do differently. I'm sorry, what worked are the pluses, and what we'd like to do differently are the deltas. Okay? What questions do you have around guidelines? Anybody have any thoughts or questions they'd like to share? Are you okay there? Make a little bit of sense? Okay. What about empathize? Yes?
Well, I know that when you are giving various workshops or seminars, that sometimes things will get very energized and flare up to the point where you're saying, we need to take a break, to calm everybody down and come back. What out of these or anything else words do you usually use? Like, what would you say if the room gets just, and you're going to send them to a break, right? Because their little volcano has started to bubble, right?
Okay.
And you need to send them off to a break, for a mental health break. What words do you actually state to get their attention and to walk them through?
Yeah. Okay, we're all going to back out of the room really slow. So we can see this.
Lay your weapon down and step away.
Well, no. You have to recognize, in many ways, one of the principles of facilitation is self-normalization. So I let the group handle its issues itself. I think of myself in that role as just a mirror, so you can see each other. That's all my role is in what I do. Okay. As far as if I can see the point where the group needs to handle that, I'm going to say, okay, we're going to take a break. I want you to talk to the person next to you about what's going on. Okay, I'm just going to say that. Just talk with the person next to you. I want you to, or if we did a spectrum, I may wrap the line so the one end can talk to the other end of the line. Controversial issues. The whole group's doing that. I want to break it down into smaller components. Okay, just as a. But you won't be doing that kind of work unless you're going to go back and work with a large group of people. But these are techniques from facilitation more than anything else.
What do you do if you are empathizing with someone and you say something rather bland, oh, that must be very difficult, or I see you're having a difficult time with that, and they say, no, I'm not. What do you do?
We move on.
Okay.
No, because in my experience, what happens, time is the greatest thing in changing anything. I mean, we all know that we change over time naturally. Allowing evolution to take place, not feeling like it's either my responsibility, it belongs to that person. I would just make it clear. I say, well, let's continue on in our discussion, and as things come up, we'll see how we might need to address things. If somebody, now you're talking about working with a large group.
Now let's say
An LSA?
5 people.
Oh, okay.
Really
Well, small group of 5 people, somebody says, I want to go forward and say,
High decibel consultation.
Yes.
when I say discuss the aspects of this, just like we were doing there, well, what's really meaningful for you about this, or what's happened? Tell us more about why you feel this way. I mean, that's really kind of the more empathetic response.
They're denying their feelings. I don't have any feelings, I'm not mad.
Then say, allow them to do that too. Say, okay, well, let's continue on, and then we can see what happens. Like I said, at that point, the biggest thing you do is just take a break. Say, okay, well, hey, maybe some of us, we need, I always take a break with homework. So with parties, I'll say, let's take a break, and during that time, I want you to really reflect on this situation.
I give them a hug break. I ask them to ask the person if they want a hug, and have a hug. And if someone doesn't want a hug, that's fine.
Okay.
But I've had that really work.
Well, no, but, and whatever works for you. I go into more of a reflective mode where I say, well, take a minute, stop, and think about what we need to do at this point. What you would like to do individually, what we need to do as a group. Okay? And find out, feelings drive actions, and feelings, really underlie the reasons for our action or inaction, I guess is what I'm going to say. So we could ask more, can you share with us more about why this is important to you? So it's not so much why their feeling is showing this is something meaningful for them. Can you share with us why this is important to you? Now, they're saying, I'm not mad, but they're not going to say, well, this isn't important. Or they might. They might. But use that to indicate where to go with it. Okay? But there's no magic cure with it. But if you're working with a larger group, let the group work with itself.
And Alan is saying sometimes it helps to say, let's take a prayer break.
Yeah.
Everybody's agree with prayer.
Sure. Oh, yeah. 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 Oh, no. As Baha'is, from a Baha'i perspective, let's stop and pray. Let's take a minute and pray. That's exactly what the writers would tell us to do, too, in that way. But again, feelings, remember what I was talking earlier, in emotional intelligence, feelings are what give life meaning. And feelings will drive our actions, and feelings show the underlying reasons for us. And when you follow those through, then you'll have a better idea of where things are. So why is it, if someone feels strongly, why is that important? What do we need to do to address that? So rather than even looking at the feeling, go to the issue. Okay. Empathize? Other thoughts? Explore? Yes, sir.
We were concerned about questioning, developing questioning skills. So with that being a central part of the process, is there can you offer more specific guidelines on how to form questions composed?
Well, okay. We gave you one way to break the world down. Well, when you talk about forming questions, we talked about format. Those are 4 different perspectives from a learning style standpoint. And that just gives you a strategy for how to ask questions. And the first question I'd always want to know from my, where I might begin, other people begin in different ways. I want to know, why is this important to us? Why do we need to address this? Other people may want to know, well, what do we know about this? Or how does this work? Or what else can we do? But that gives you 4 perspectives. The important thing is to hit all 4 of those. That gives you 4 starting points, essentially, for asking questions about it. But questions, if a large group, if I say, any questions, what did I do here? I didn't ask for questions. I said, talk amongst yourselves and see what questions. If, like you're at feast, okay, and you want to create conversation or input, nobody's saying anything, say, well, just talk to the person next to you. What comes to your mind? Once people share it with another person, they're much more likely to be willing to share it as a big group. Okay? Once it's out there, in mediation, once we talk to people in caucusing, and they share something, they're much more likely, they say, oh, I shared it, and the world didn't end.
In American culture, our big challenge right now is we're still top-down oriented as far as structure. People always look to the leader to solve the problems. But the House of Justice has been asking us to develop grassroots skills, and that's exactly it. The grassroots, the people are not accustomed to solving the things within themselves with a leadership facilitation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think society now, as we talk about, the advance of one part of society and decline of others, the parts of society that are advancing are those people that are willing to go out and address the world's problems, just individually.
Well, one of the things what he's saying is I think a lot of companies are finding out that this is no longer working, where they give you a command and everybody else runs to do it. And it's not working because these guys are not appreciating it. They're more intelligent than they used to be.
Oh, yeah.
And I worked with bosses that I really appreciated because they said, okay, you've got an issue, don't come to me with just a problem. Come to me with at least 2, if not more, options. And then we'll discuss your problem.
And see, the boss is saying, in that case, he doesn't have to say yes or no. He can pick one of the options. Right? No, I mean, seriously. Wouldn't you rather pick an option rather than have to say yes or no? You can really see that. Okay. Explore. Other questions? Yeah.
I had a question. I'm pretty clear on open-ended questions versus closed, and neutral versus positional. Could you speak a little more to that as far as as far as like opinions, like you're trying not to have your opinion in there, or
Well,
as far as like being more neutral?
let me give you an example of a positional question from Ruhi. And I can't think of what book it's in, but Ruhi tends to use quadrant 4 questions fairly often. And they'll say, don't you agree that the world needs to be more unified? Okay, well, the position in that question is that the world needs to be more unified. Okay, that's positional. Now, that's a wonderful position, but the open-ended question might say, how do you feel about, number 1 would be open and neutral. How do you feel about the unification of the world? Or what would be an appropriate model for structuring our future society? Or something like that that's open versus closed. Closed, a closed positional is just verifying somebody's already stated perspective. I guess maybe it's the best way to say it. Okay. So, but now keep in mind with the spectrums, I wouldn't necessarily consider those open questions. When I say, how interested are you in having a newsletter, that's not quite a yes or no, but it's not quite an open question either. It's really kind of in between. Because it's a limited response. Well, I'm somewhat interested, very interested. I could be a lot interested. I really enjoyed, it could invite further response, but it's not a full open question. Just try it. And just begin by, how can we work together to create a truly vibrant children's class? Great. Just focus on the positive. Focus on the possibilities. And allow for a wide range of action. Expand. Meditation. Again, prayer, stepping outside, recognizing the simple ground rule there is having at least one period of sleep between any important decision to allow people to kind of step away, reflect on it, think about it, meditate on it, and they'll come back with a better decision. In all the work I do in conflict resolution, I know if we can have 2 meetings, we'll have a better decision than what we'll get at 1 meeting. Absolutely. Okay. Any questions on brainstorming? Values? Now, all we really did here was kind of check off the values, just to kind of reflect on them a little bit, just to kind of keep them in mind as we went through. As I mentioned before, when I've done ethical classes, we'll take a look at what are the choices you have available and what are the values you feel need to be part of this decision, and then which of these choices are in best alignment with these values. And when you do that, it's really hard to say no. It's not like you can say, oh yeah, but we don't really believe in trustworthiness. Well, yeah, why do you have it up on your wall? And so those are decisions, I think, that truly become sustainable, that have some value foundation in them. And then finally, evaluate. Because we'll talk about the other 2 as we go on here. Okay, choices. Yes?
I'm just wondering if you've ever had the issue where they did the training, they did the meditation or pass or whatever, and the values, and then you come down to the spectrum where you're trying to will won't work and whatnot, have you ever gotten to a point where you said, well, wait, maybe we need to go back up to the framing, or maybe we need to go back to the idea?
Yes.
And,
Yes.
because it needs to be more limiting, or it needs to be
Yes.
enlarged, or
Yeah.
it needs
Yeah.
to be
Yes.
something else?
Yes, yes, yes.
What makes you, how do you know when you have to go back and
You don't. If it becomes overwhelming, if you're not getting anywhere, hey, we're not resolving this. Well, let's take a look at the frame again. Or we have too many ideas. Let's make it a little narrower, or whatever. Quite often, all the frame really gives you is a starting point. And usually, you don't necessarily have to go back and revisit it. You're not tied to it, but you can at any point revisit any step. I mean, if you get down to evaluate and say, wow, I was thinking about a ground rule we might want to have here, that's fine. If you're in expand and say, well, we need to know more truth, we have more information we need to know, that's fine. I mean, don't think of this in any way in any rigid order. Think of these more as 9 concepts that you can use in a consultative environment. Okay? I'm presenting them in progression here, because if I were to do it, I would have this type of progression, but that doesn't limit you. And if you find a better way of doing it, do it.
Okay, the other thing is reciprocal ethics. I know it says golden rule here, so it's like everybody has some kind of a rule for it. I don't quite understand the reciprocal.
In any action generally has a reciprocal aspect to it. Now, I'm just thinking over here where we have the newsletter. Well, the radio station may look for input from its listeners. Hey, give us a call if you'd like to hear something different, or we want to stay in touch with, it's kind of some form of exchange. It's not unilateral. You're just not putting it out there. Now, if you're putting a newsletter, let us know if this is what you need in the newsletter. Stay in touch with us. Share articles with us. Whatever you'd like to do. But I think a form of reciprocity is always helpful. I guess I was thinking of that almost contractually too, where both parties have obligations in any agreement like that. So in anything that we do. Stop and think about it though for a second. What are the obligations of a seeker? And are you offering the opportunity to them to fulfill those obligations? If all you're doing is standing and lecturing, they're not able to participate.
So it's offering the opportunity.
Yeah, I would say.
Interact.
Yeah, offering.
You may not get the interaction, but you offer the opportunity.
Yeah. That has to be part of it. That has to be part of it. There are a few things in the writings on reciprocity, but basically it just comes down to the golden rule. Okay, so conduct the kind of class you would like to be part of. Okay. So evaluate. Any questions on those? The simplest thing is offer people choices. Rather than who wants to go to lunch at 1:30, say, well, 1:30, 1:45, 2 o'clock. Just a simple choice. People always feel better when they have a little bit of a choice, right? Rather than you have to do this. And the spectrums. Now the spectrums, the hardest thing in that, I can see in the class is, what am I going to ask when we're standing in line here? I don't know where to go with this, right? I don't know where to go. So you have to open the questions up into, I tend to think just respond. The easiest thing is just respond to proposals and don't use spectrums for debating. So how about if we try this? Everybody move. Yeah, not quite. How about if we tried this? Everybody move. How about if we tried this? Whoa, we've got strong consensus there. Floating ideas. It's really difficult in negotiation to separate the idea from the decision. Quite often, people will always, there are always some people who will say, well, let's just do this. We don't have time to discuss this. We have a busy agenda tonight. We have to move on, right? But, okay, how many times do we want to revisit this idea? And, is it better to have one well-crafted idea out of an LSA meeting than 5 poorly crafted ideas?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, ask yourself that. I mean, do we just need to make a decision, or are we making the best decision we can for the community, or are we really, because that's the essence. I mean, the consultation is what creates the vibrancy in the community. You know, and it allows everybody to feel part of it. I mean, we're a spiritual democracy, you know, where we should have everyone participating. That's the essence of who we are. If you think of what's interesting, I was thinking, think of voting as a form of consultation. Because in voting, everyone participates, and everyone participates equally in the same way, and you all come to a united decision that everyone is joyful about at the end, right? I mean, voting almost has those aspects of consultation to it. Now, you know, when I talk about yes or no voting, I'm talking about voting for institutions. You're not voting yes or no per person. You're voting for, well, out of the 100 people in our community, who are the 9 I feel that can help this community move forward? Okay. But we do so with personal reflection, through meditation. We do, you know, it has so many parallels to what good consultation should be.